Yow, this is gonna be a strange one. Though, when is it never strange on this channel? So, Call of Duty, video games, completely apolitical, right? Damn, never thought I'd actually be doing one of these, but yeah, man, wherever there needs to be commentary, we shall venture. So, Call of Duty is obviously releasing a new video game for God knows how many years running now. And basically it's just a rehash of Modern Warfare, which was a successful video game like back in the day. And Call of Duty hasn't really done much to change its success, innovate on the game, or any kind of like successes that made the original game like much better. In fact, the game quality has just got so much worse and worse and worse as the time goes on. Like we bought every game, not religiously, but pretty much bought not every game, but you know, for the first 3 years after Call of Duty, 4 years, I bought pretty much every game, and like none of them just ever met the expectations that were Modern Warfare 2. And ultimately the game is a very strange one. Everyone loves a shoot 'em up, everyone loves a little game. You know, this goes back to like GoldenEye on Nintendo 64. For those who don't know, this is a James Bond game where obviously looking back retrospectively, you'll be like, man, these graphics were terrible, you know what I'm saying? These were terrible, but that was our Call of Duty back in the day. So Call of Duty basically continues the whole classic trend of shoot 'em ups in which boys, you know, take out their frustration, take out their inability to actually gain real power in the real world and stuff like that in video games. And you know, video games have always been the language of the unempowered, and for the most part they're a good way to spend some time, lose a few hours, you know, get into a hobby. They're okay, until the military starts basically using them as propaganda tools to start recruiting people from a very young age. Yes, this is a thing. So it's interesting. This one actually is rather intriguing because of the fact that it actually, well, Call of Duty has always been anti-communist hysteria, but it then goes further to basically bring in real life figures of today like Yuri Bezmenov, and I'm seeing a whole lot of chatter and a whole lot of traffic online basically spouting that this is very anti-liberal sentiment. And for those who don't know, Yuri Bezmenov is a Russian defectant, or at least a Soviet defectant, who basically kind of like, I guess, gave a spotlight onto this idea that communists, or at least like Marxism or whatever have you, liberal ideas were being basically imported into the West as a way of belittling and demoralizing their society, and ultimately would lead to the collapse of Western civilization, as you know, we all love to hear online and so on. But it's weird, how has, I guess most people would ask, how has fascist rhetoric or narratives made their way into video games? It's so interesting because video games always prided themselves on, you know, the stories of the underdog, someone who obviously didn't have any power coming into a, you know, a mass load of power, and basically using that for good, virtue, and all of those good values there. And you know, to some extent, I guess some people got the message, and it seems that a whole lot of people didn't, because Call of Duty just ended up being one of those classic memes in which teenagers used their valuable time to basically vent, get angry online, punch walls, and use the N-word very liberally. So let's get right into this one. Let's see if the new game has the potential to actually I don't know, change the narrative, change its audience, you know, educate them a little bit, and maybe transcend the kind of like Dylanism that has taken over our society. Because the last thing we need is more pro-fascist propaganda. I hope that's not what you're doing. Alright guys, gonna put the volume down because it's like super loud. But let's get straight into this, man. You can already see that's the screenshot over there. It's your guy Yuri Bezmenov, well-known fascist, promoter of authoritarianism and all of that good stuff. So let's get straight into it and see what Call of Duty is offering us in terms of a storyline and some critical thinking.
Around you, you are in a state of war, and you have precious little time to save yourself. It's a slow process which we call active measures. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. With a violent change of power, structure and economy, period of normalization. This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. The disaster is coming closer and closer. The danger is real.
Yeah, well, I mean, damn. I couldn't really say that was that. I mean, people are always going to take it two ways, but there's a video that I actually want to watch next and I actually want to react to because that's an alarming, I guess it's a demonstration of the Call of Duty kind of like population, or at least people who take the game very seriously and you know, have built careers and all of that kind of like, you know, fun stuff around it. And ultimately I'm seeing a whole lot of chatter online that basically talks about whether or not the game is pro X or pro Y and Z. And for me personally, it's coming across more as maybe critical of America, if anything, rather than, I don't know, taking a particular side. So, you know, it's obviously a lot of the clips and a lot of the stuff used in the background, especially over the kind of like overly dramatic voiceover of Yuri Bezmenov there, is actually seems to be more pointing at the fact that the American government, or at least the American kind of like a democratic establishment, just is not necessarily serving the people for what it was meant to do. And, you know, this idea about obviously a certain ideology usurping what people traditionally knew, you know, I think people may be over-interpreting that or just overreaching because of the fact that obviously, well, for a first, Yuri Bezmenov was clearly proved wrong in the fact that America still stands today and is still one of the most powerful nations economically, militarily, and, you know, in many other aspects. In terms of obviously Bezmenov's kind of like history when it comes to being against, you know, the liberal movements, you know, liberations of the 60s and all of these things, basically all of the things that people tend to hyper focus on what Bezmenov said. And this is obviously where the classic notion of like calling everything that isn't conservative and, you know, religiously kind of like classic or traditional, communist, Marxist, you know, socialist, whenever you see really like dumb kind of fluorided Trump supporters talking about, you know, oh, that's just communist, like anything that is demonstrably wrong, this is where it kind of like originates from. And we can see this in the use of like, you know, promoters of like that classic culture in the 60s and 70s, especially if we're talking at evangelical churches. You know, the use of communism, Marxism and all of these kind of like buzzwords has been a long game in the conservative like circles. When we look at like the rhetoric that was used against the LGBT lobby, the rhetoric that was used against the women's rights lobby, the rhetoric that was used against the civil rights, a lot of that was lambasted under, you know, communism, Marxists and so on. You know, you were called a commie classically if you felt that, you know, segregation was morally wrong. You were called a commie if you felt that people could actually be attracted to the same sex. You know, you were called a commie if you felt that women's, you know, rightful place is where they choose, not where men decide. And, you know, ultimately, we need to take into consideration that Bezmenov comes from patriarchal society. As much as people love to talk about communism and the Soviet Union, etc., a lot of these particular countries and so on are still operating on so many systems and so many ideologies that are so contradictory to the nature of communism or socialism, in the fact that he clearly believes in the idea of a traditional society. He believes in the idea of maintaining a certain rule. He believes in the idea of a hierarchy, which is obviously a red flag for anyone who is of a communist nature or a communist influence, because these things are meant to be abolished or at least neutralized in post-socialism world, post-Marxist world. Like, these things are supposed to decrease as education gets better, infrastructures are better invested, and so on, and social ills and historical like oppressions and systems are addressed. These things are meant to get better, and ultimately, whether or not that was his intention, it's interesting to note that we haven't really seen it really like materialize. So we're in 2020. Yuri Bezmenov was defecting during the Cold War era and stuff like that. I'm gonna make sure that is definitely the era. It probably is. But in terms of obviously where capitalist communist kind of like rivalry was at its highest, and America was doing everything in its opportunity and power to belittle the ideology of communism because of America's very capitalist ideology. And a lot of people obviously don't really like that reality because it paints America as very antagonistic. And America's history is full of antagonism. America's history is full of, especially when we're talking about current events, we're talking about espionage, we're talking about training the Taliban, we're talking about getting involved in foreign policy that, is now provably very detrimental to not just America, but a lot of European countries in the vacuum of rule that it's left and the militant extremists that it's now produced. And ultimately, this is a decision of Bush, but that's a video for another day. Conservatives are always war hungry, shock horror. But in terms of obviously this video, there's so many things that people are going to take from this video and choose to cherry pick. So the fact that Yuri Bezmenov obviously talks about mainly political kind of structures that promise X, Y, and Z and don't really take people's desires seriously, don't really take people's demands seriously. That's such a general broad statement, and it's very low critical thinking, because anyone can say politicians lie, politicians don't deliver, and it's not revolutionary in 2020 to basically say that politicians lie, because come on, man, that's that's like 2001 2005 kind of like conspiracy kind of like YouTube levels. Like we're definitely way beyond that. We now understand how the systems work. We now understand how historical allegiances with certain countries and to certain ideologies have led, especially particularly America and like UK, into the situation that they're in now. What I find hilarious about obviously the use of Yuri Bezmenov, it's almost a troll to the common person, because of the fact that Yuri Bezmenov's theories haven't materialized, as I was saying before. But furthermore, what I wanted to comment on is the fact that we have a whistleblower who is almost widely kind of in the pop culture, especially when we're talking about Nazi fascism, is upheld as the key whistleblower to the impending kind of doom of Western society. Again, fictitious, hasn't really manifested in any kind of like provable way, any material way that we can say on a systemic level, yeah, Yuri Bezmenov's theories and Yuri Bezmenov's accusations are definitely kind of materializing. But we do have conspiracies, we do have whistleblowers, however, that are proven right. We have Julian Assange, who helped, Tracy Manning demonstrate that maybe sometimes invading forces is not such a good idea. Maybe sometimes freedom is not necessarily the freedom that you thought it was, you know. But these are people who are obviously speaking against the American government, speaking against the American idea of supremacy across the world when it comes to just general, I guess, way of life. They're demonized by the entirety of the American populace. They have not been pardoned, and in terms of obviously, you know, being upheld as figures of like true valor and true bravery, taking on, you know, establishments and institutions that they know for, you know, just to be frank, if they wanted to kill them, make it look like an accident, then their own nation wouldn't even bat an eyelid. And another example is obviously Edward Snowden, the fact that he's spent all of his time now in Russia, has not seen his family in God knows how many years, and, you know, is in no view of a pardon for revealing to American citizens the fact that they were being spied on by their own government, and their freedoms and, you know, human rights were being violated under a very flimsy reasoning of, you know, domestic terrorism. I mean, it's laughable. Well, I think it was foreign terrorism at the time, just in general, but it's laughable because when we get domestic terrorism, like, you know, the Proud Boys, the neo-Nazis walking around in Charlottesville saying Jews will not replace us, that's not particularly the threat that they're talking about, and there hasn't really been much action in terms of trying to belittle the efforts, or at least criminalize and, you know, make it harder for these people to unite. If anything, the current Trump administration is emboldened and, you know, really allowed these guys to thrive in the 4 years that he's been there. But to further this kind of like conversation, you know, the fact that we watch certain films such as Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and everyone, you know, unanimously agrees that Captain America is completely in the right when we're talking about shutting down, you know, what's his name, SHIELD, because it's been, you know, infiltrated by Hydra, and, you know, they're using all of the technology that we now, you know, take for granted to spy on us, and they're going to use a machine that basically kind of like indiscriminately kind of kills off people because of the fact that they have a risk of being X, Y, and Z, and the person obviously pushing, or at least the ideology pushing that, was one of Hydra, which obviously relates back to Nazi regime and the Aryan theory, etc. And it's hilarious because we never have any further form of critical thinking in the fact that, you know, a lot of American theory is still based on white supremacy. It's based on that Aryan theory of racial supremacy, and we still see this today in the fact that a lot of people believe the reason Black Lives Matter is angry, upset, or, you know, or triggered, and all of these kinds of stuff, is because naturally they don't actually deserve human rights. They don't deserve to be treated like human beings. And being shot, you know, actually having your neck stepped on is a privilege, because being shot in the face, man, you just don't want that kind of brain splatter all over the place. You know, you don't want your kids to see that. You don't want your mom to have to clean that up. So, you know, a knee to the neck is human rights. It's, you know, it's a privilege, if anything. Like, I'm on your side. I'm on your side. My cousin dates a black person, so, you know, it's just hilarious when I see these kind of like conspiracy theorists who are now kind of like using this particular rhetoric to radicalize a whole lot of youth into this ideology of liberalism being a cancer to society, when, you know, the biggest threat to America is white supremacy. It's always been domestic terrorism, you know. And yeah, so let's get right into the next video. It'll be on the next video because my videos are way too long, and my commentary goes on for way too long. So guys, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe the videos, because I'm trying my hardest to grow this particular channel while trying to maintain passion for the other channel. And I'll see you on the next one. Stay sexy.